Hey guys, just a quick thank you to all of you amazing legends that are subscribed. I could not have done it without you. But most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please do us a favor and hit the subscribe button and like this video. It's free and it really helps our small team out. Thank you. It started off like any other date night. I had matched with Paul on Tinder a few weeks prior, and after a promising first date, he invited me over for a home-cooked meal. Romantic, right? Little did I know the horrors that awaited behind his apartment door. I arrive at his place feeling excited, if a little nervous. Paul greeted me with a warm smile and welcomed me inside. Everything seemed perfectly normal. The apartment was tidy, and there were no immediate red flags. He offered me a glass of wine as he put the finishing touches on our meal. That's when the first hint of trouble arose. As I turned to admire a piece of artwork on the wall, I heard the unmistakable sound of a lock clicking into place behind me. I spun around to find Paul pocketing an old-fashioned key, his expression unreadable. "Just a habit," he said nonchalantly, brushing off my concern. But a knot of unease began to form in the pit of my stomach. Over the course of the evening, Paul's behavior took an increasingly unsettling turn. He insisted on serving me, refusing to let me lift a finger. Every time I tried to help clear the table or refill my own drink, he'd swoop in and do it himself, almost as if he didn't want me moving around freely. The conversation quickly turned uncomfortably personal, with Paul grilling me about my family, my job, my past relationships. I tried to deflect or change the subject, but he was relentless, constantly steering the dialogue back to his probing questions. At one point, I excused myself to use the restroom. When I returned, he had rearranged the entire table setting, claiming the lighting was better from a different angle. It was a small thing, but it felt like a power play, a way of asserting his control over the situation. As the night wore on, Paul's demeanor grew increasingly erratic. One moment he'd be his charming, sociable self, and the next, he'd fly into a rage over something as trivial as a spilled drink. I found myself walking on eggshells, terrified of setting him off. Finally, I knew I had to leave. I mentioned having an early morning the next day, but Paul wasn't having it. He insisted I stay longer, his eyes taking on a wild, almost feral look. That's when I made a beeline for the door, only to find it locked from the outside. My heart pounded in my chest as I rattled the doorknob, desperate for an escape route. Paul approached calmly, that old key dangling from his fingers. "I'm sorry, but you can't leave yet," he said, his voice chillingly calm. "We haven't finished our date." In that moment, the full weight of the situation hit me. Paul had orchestrated this entire evening, luring me into his carefully constructed trap. I pleaded with him, trying to reason, but he was unmoved. As the hours ticked by, his behavior became increasingly unhinged. He had alternated between moments of eerie calm and explosive outbursts, ranting and raving like a madman. At one point, he even brandished a knife, waving it in my face as he railed against some perceived slight. I cowered in the corner, convinced this was how it would all end. But then, just as abruptly as his rage had surfaced, it seemed to dissipate. He unlocked the door, allowing me to stumble out into the hallway in a daze. As I fled, his parting words echoed in my ears. "I'll see you again soon." In the days and weeks that followed, I lived in constant fear. I changed my routines, avoided going out alone, even considered moving to a new city altogether. Everywhere I went, I couldn't shake the feeling that Paul was watching me, waiting for his chance to strike again. One night, as I was leaving work late, I could have sworn I saw his car parked across the street. My heart raced as I hurried to my own vehicle, locking the doors the moment I was inside. I drove home in a state of sheer panic, constantly checking my rearview mirror for any sign of him. A few weeks later, I received a package in the mail, no return address, just my name and address scrawled on the brown paper wrapping. With trembling hands, I opened it to find a single item inside. An old-fashioned key, identical to the one Paul had used to lock me in that night. I immediately called the police, but by the time they arrived, the package was gone as if it had never existed. They searched my apartment and found no signs of forced entry or any other evidence of foul play. From that day on, I lived in constant fear, jumping every shadow, flinching at the slightest sound. I invested in a state-of-the-art home security system and started taking self-defense classes, determined to never again be caught in such a vulnerable position. I still have nightmares about that fateful night. The sound of that lock clicking into place, the wild look in Paul's eyes as he brandished that knife. Those images are seared into my memory, a constant reminder of how quickly a seemingly normal situation can take a horrifying turn. I've tried to move on, put that traumatic experience behind me, but deep down, I know the scars will never fully heal. All it takes is the sight of an old-fashioned key, and I'm right back in that apartment, trapped and helpless, at the mercy of a madman's twisted desires. It was a Friday night, and I had just matched with a gorgeous woman named Jessie on Tinder. Her profile seemed almost too good to be true. Stunning photos, witty bio, and interests that aligned perfectly with mine. I couldn't believe my luck when she enthusiastically messaged me first, sparking an engaging conversation that stretched on for days. We hit it off immediately, exchanging flirty banter and sharing personal stories, as if we'd known each other for years. When Jessie suggested meeting up for drinks, I eagerly agreed, my heart fluttering with excitement and anticipation. Jessie picked the location, a dive bar in a rough part of town that she assured me was a hidden gem with great drink specials. Ignoring the slight unease I felt, I decided to trust her judgment and agreed to meet her there later that evening. As I pulled up to the dimly lit bar, my nerves spiked. The surrounding area was deserted, with only a handful of cars lining the cracked pavement. Taking a deep breath, I made my way inside, the heavy wooden door creaking shut behind me. The interior was just as grungy as the outside, dim lighting, worn furniture, and a thick haze of cigarette smoke that stung my eyes. A few grizzled regulars nursed their drinks at the bar, but otherwise the place was nearly empty. I grabbed a high-top table in the corner, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in my gut. Maybe this place wasn't as cool as Jessie had made it sound. I ordered a beer from the disinterested bartender and settled in to wait for my date. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Still no sign of Jessie, and she wasn't responding to my texts. Just as I was about to give up and leave, two burly men approached my table, blocking my exit. The larger of the two loomed over me menacingly, his face twisted into a sneer. "Where's my money, punk?" he growled, his breath reeking of stale beer. I stammered, trying to explain that there must be some mistake, but the second man cut me off. "Don't play dumb," he spat. "You owe us $500, and we ain't leaving till we get it." My heart raced as realization dawned. This was a setup. Jessie, the too-perfect Tinder match, had lured me here to be robbed. The pieces clicked into place. Her insistence on this sketchy bar, her failure to show up, the sudden appearance of these thugs. Panic clawed at my throat as the larger man grabbed a fistful of my shirt, inking me halfway across the table. I could see the bartender purposefully avoiding eye contact, seemingly uninterested in intervening. "Listen, man, there's been a misunderstanding," I pleaded, my voice quivering. "I don't have any money on me. Just let me go, and we can forget this ever happened." The man's rancid breath washed over my face as he sneered. "Don't try to play me, pretty boy. I know you got cash. Now hand it over, along with that fancy watch and whatever else you got before things get ugly." I glanced around the bar, desperately searching for any sign of help or escape, but the few other patrons were pointedly ignoring the scene unfolding in the corner. With a sinking dread, I realized I was on my own. Trembling, I reached for my wallet, hoping the meager cash I had would be enough to placate them. But as soon as the larger man saw the bills, his eyes narrowed greedily. "That's a start," he growled. "When I want your phone, watch, that nice ring too." His beefy hand clamped down on my wrist like a vise, his grimy nails digging into my skin. Panic surged through me as I realized the gravity of my situation. These guys weren't going to let me walk away, no matter what I gave them. In a desperate bid for survival, I seized my half-full beer bottle and smashed it against the table. The shattering glass caused both men to flinch momentarily, giving me a split-second opening. With adrenaline coursing through my veins, I shoved past the smaller thug and bolted for the door. Angry shouts echoed behind me as I burst out into the cool night air, but I didn't dare look back. Fueled by sheer terror, I sprinted down the desolate street, my gasping breaths the only sound besides the pounding of my own pulse. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs threatened to give out, finally stumbling onto a well-lit main road. Weaving through the startled pedestrians, I ducked into the safety of a crowded diner, collapsing into a worn vinyl booth. Safe, at least for the moment. My entire body trembled with residual panic as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. How could I have been so silly, so utterly blind to the obvious red flags? In my desperation to connect with someone, I'd willingly walked straight into a dangerous trap. After catching my breath, I called for an Uber, keeping a wary eye on the entrance the entire time. The ride home was tense, my heart leaping at every turn, half expecting those two men to materialize from the shadows. It wasn't until I was back in the safety of my apartment, door bolted and secured, that I finally allowed myself to process the harrowing ordeal. I'd narrowly escaped what could have been a life-altering or even deadly situation. In the days that followed, I grappled with feeling both foolish and violated, questioning how I could have misjudged the situation so severely. I reported the incident to the police and deleted my dating apps, resolving to be infinitely more cautious about online interactions. While I eventually moved past that traumatic night, it left an indelible mark on me, a harsh reminder of the dangers that can lurk behind a seemingly innocuous online profile. It was supposed to be just another Tinder date, a chance to connect with someone new and see where the night might lead. But as I sat across from Dan at the dimly lit bar, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The evening had started pleasantly enough. Dan was charming and attentive, his green eyes sparkling with interest as we chatted about our shared love of travel and our favorite local hiking spots. He had an easy laugh and a way of making me feel like I was the only person in the room. But as the conversation flowed, I started to notice little things that didn't quite add up, like when he mentioned the name of my childhood best friend, casually dropping it into the conversation as if he'd known me for years, or when he brought a specific incident from my college days, a story I was sure I had never shared with anyone outside of my close circle of friends. At first, I tried to brush it off, telling myself that maybe I had mentioned these things in passing on my Tinder profile or during our initial chats. But as the night wore on, the coincidences became harder to ignore. Dan seemed to know things about me that he shouldn't have, intimate details that I had never shared with him or anyone else on the dating app. He knew the name of my parents' hometown, the exact breed of my first pet, and even the title of my unpublished novel that I had only ever mentioned to a handful of people. I felt a growing sense of unease as I watched him across the table, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know the truth. "How do you know so much about me?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "We've only just met, but you seem to know things that I've never told you." For a moment, Dan's face froze, and I saw a flicker of something dark pass behind his eyes. Then he leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. "I guess it's time to come clean," he said, his voice low and steady. "I'm not who you think I am." My heart began to race as he explained that he was actually a close friend of my ex-boyfriend, someone who had been privy to all the intimate details of our relationship. He had used Tinder to track me down, creating a fake profile and carefully crafting his messages to match my interests and preferences. "Your ex asked me to do this," Dan said, his eyes glinting with a kind of perverse pleasure. "He wanted me to get close to you, to find out what you were up to and to warn you about your bad habits." I felt sick to my stomach as the realization washed over me. This wasn't a date at all. It was a twisted game, a sick ploy orchestrated by my vengeful ex and his unhinged friend. As the night wore on, Dan's demeanor shifted from charming to sinister. He began to list off my supposed flaws and shortcomings, painting a picture of me as a selfish and manipulative person who deserved to be taught a lesson. I tried to defend myself, to argue that he didn't know the whole story, but it was like talking to a brick wall. Dan was determined to carry out his twisted mission, no matter the cost. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up from the table, my legs shaking with a combination of fear and anger. "I don't know what you and my ex are trying to accomplish here," I said, my voice trembling, "but I won't be a part of your sick games anymore." I turned to leave, but Dan's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist, his grip tight and painful. "You're not going anywhere," he hissed, his eyes wild with a kind of manic intensity. "We're not finished here." I wrenched my arm free and stumbled towards the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear Dan shouting after me, his voice growing fainter as I pushed my way through the crowded bar and out into the cool night air. I ran for what felt like blocks, my feet pounding against the pavement until I finally collapsed against a nearby building, gasping for breath. The reality of what had just happened began to sink in, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. How could I have been so stupid, so trusting? How could I have let myself walk into such an obvious trap? As I called a rideshare to take me home, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over me. The night had started with such promise, but it had quickly devolved into a nightmare. I knew one thing for certain: I would never be using Tinder again. The risk was simply too high, the potential for danger too great. From now on, I would stick to meeting people the old-fashioned way, through friends and shared interests. As I rode home in silence, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anger towards my ex, towards Dan, and towards myself. I had let my guard down and I had paid the price. But I also knew that I was stronger than this, that I wouldn't let one bad experience define me. I would learn from this mistake, and I would move forward wiser and more cautious than before. And maybe, just maybe, I would find love again someday, but it would be on my terms, not anyone else's. It all started with a simple swipe right on Tinder. Tanya's profile was cute, and her bio made her seem like a fun, down-to-earth person. We matched instantly and started chatting. The conversation flowed effortlessly, and we seemed to have a lot in common. After a few days of messaging, I asked her out on a date and she eagerly accepted. The first date was at a trendy coffee shop in the heart of the city. Tanya was even more beautiful in person, with a warm smile and sparkling eyes. We talked for hours, laughing at each other's jokes and sharing stories about our lives. The date was going so well that we decided to extend it and grab dinner at a nearby restaurant. Throughout the evening, Tanya was attentive, engaging, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement about the possibility of a future with her. However, as the night went on, something began to feel off. Tanya started to get a bit too intense, asking me personal questions that made me uncomfortable. She also seemed to be getting overly attached, talking about future plans as if we were already in a serious relationship. I tried to brush it off, thinking that maybe she was just excited about our connection. A few days after the date, I realized that I wasn't feeling the spark I had hoped for. I decided to be honest with Tanya and let her know that while I had a great time, I didn't see a romantic future for us. I hoped that we could remain friends, but I wanted to be clear about my intentions. That's when things took a turn for the worse. Tanya started bombarding me with messages, alternating between pleading for another chance and accusing me of leading her on. She would send me long, rambling texts in the middle of the night, telling me how much she missed me and how she couldn't imagine her life without me. I tried to be gentle but firm in my responses, reiterating that I wasn't interested in a romantic relationship. But Tanya wouldn't take no for an answer. She started tagging me in bizarre social media posts, sharing photos of us from our date and claiming that we were soulmates. She would leave comments on my posts, professing her love for me and begging me to give her another chance. It was embarrassing and uncomfortable, and I had no idea how to make it stop. Things escalated even further when Tanya started showing up at my workplace uninvited. I worked at a small marketing firm, and one day I walked into the office to find her waiting for me in the lobby. She had a bouquet of flowers and a crazed look in her eyes. I tried to be polite but firm, telling her that she needed to leave and that her behavior was inappropriate, but she just smiled and said that she wouldn't give up on our love. From that point on, I was constantly on edge, never knowing when Tanya might show up or what she might do next. She would send me packages filled with love letters and gifts, leave voicemails professing her undying devotion, and even contact my friends and family on social media. I started to feel like I was being stalked, and I was afraid for my safety. I tried to get help from the authorities, but they told me that there wasn't much they could do unless Tanya physically threatened me. I felt helpless and alone, wondering how I had gotten myself into this situation. I started to question my own judgment, wondering if I had somehow led Tanya on or given her the wrong impression. The breaking point came when I woke up one night to find Tanya standing outside my bedroom window, holding a knife and screaming my name. I called the police and they arrived just in time to arrest her. It turned out that she had been planning to break into my apartment and confront me, convinced that we were meant to be together. Tanya was charged with stalking and attempted breaking and entering, and I was granted a restraining order against her. But even from behind bars, she continued to harass me, sending me letters and having her friends contact me on her behalf. It's been months since that first date with Tanya, and I'm still dealing with the fallout. I've had to change my phone number, delete my social media accounts, and even move to a new apartment. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering if she'll find me again. The experience has left me scared and wary of online dating. I know that not everyone on Tinder is like Tanya, but I can't help but feel a sense of unease every time I open the app. I'm taking a break from dating for now, focusing on my own mental health and well-being. Looking back, I wish I had trusted my instincts when something felt off about Tanya's behavior. I wish I had been more cautious and taken steps to protect myself sooner, but I also know that I'm not to blame for her actions. No one deserves to be stalked or harassed, no matter how brief or casual the initial connection may have been. If there's one thing I've learned from this experience, it's the importance of setting boundaries and trusting your gut. It's okay to say no to end things if something doesn't feel right. And if someone can't respect those boundaries, it's important to seek help and take steps to protect yourself. I may never fully recover from my experience with Tanya, but I'm determined to move forward and not let it define me. I know that there are good people out there, and I won't let one bad experience ruin my chances of finding love and happiness. But I'll definitely be more cautious and selective in the future, and I'll never forget the lessons I've learned from this terrifying ordeal. I never thought a simple Tinder match would turn into such a nightmare. Manny seemed normal at first: attractive profile, decent job, shared interests. We started chatting, and things moved quickly. Within days, he was sending messages constantly, always wanting to know every detail of my day. I should have noticed the red flags earlier. His texts went from casual conversation to intensely personal within hours. He'd ask about my childhood, my hopes, my deepest fears, all before we even met in person. Something felt off, but I brushed it aside, thinking maybe he was just genuinely interested. The flowers arrived at my office on the day of our first date. A massive bouquet of red roses, delivered with a handwritten note about how excited he was to meet me. My coworkers raised their eyebrows, whispering among themselves. It was a grand gesture, but it felt like too much too soon. I tried to ignore the nagging feeling in my gut, convincing myself that I was just being paranoid. That evening, we met at an upscale restaurant downtown. Manny was dressed perfectly, too perfectly. His shirt was pressed, his hair meticulously styled. He watched me with an intensity that made me slightly uneasy, like he was trying to memorize every detail of my face. The conversation started normally, but quickly spiraled into something bizarre. He began talking about our future as if we'd been together for years. Detailed plans about where we'd live, the number of children we'd have, even suggestions for pet names. I tried to smile and redirect the conversation, hoping to keep things light. But Manny was locked into his fantasy, describing our imaginary life together with frightening specificity. My attempts to create distance became more obvious. I mentioned work commitments, subtle hints that I wasn't as invested, but he seemed oblivious, continuing to paint this elaborate picture of our shared future. His eyes were intense, never breaking contact, filled with a strange mixture of hope and desperation. When I finally mustered the courage to express my discomfort, everything changed instantly. The charming facade disappeared, replaced by a rage I'd never witnessed before. His voice raised, drawing attention from nearby tables. People started looking, uncomfortable with the sudden tension. He accused me of leading him on, of playing with his emotions. The accusations became more heated and more personal. He brought up details from our conversations, twisting my words to fit his narrative. I felt like I was suffocating, trapped in this public confrontation with a man I barely knew. Restaurant staff approached, suggesting he lower his voice. But Manning was beyond reason. His anger seemed to consume him, transforming him into someone completely unrecognizable from the person I had been chatting with online. His fists clenched, and for a moment I wondered if he might become physically violent. I managed to gather my things and leave, my heart racing. The walk to my car felt endless, constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering if he was following me. Every shadow, every footstep made me jump. The safety of my vehicle brought momentary relief, but the encounter left me shaken to my core. The next few days were tense. Multiple messages flooded my phone, apologetic at first, then increasingly aggressive. He oscillated between begging for forgiveness and lashing out, blaming me for his outburst. I blocked his number, his social media, any possible way he could contact me. But the experience left a lasting impression, a reminder of the unpredictability of modern dating. Friends advised me to report the incident, to document everything. I took screenshots, saved messages, prepared myself for potential further escalation. The digital age had brought new complexities to personal safety, and I was learning them firsthand. As days turned into weeks, I found myself jumping at every notification, every unknown number. I changed my routines, avoided places we discussed, constantly looking over my shoulder. The fear of running into him, of reigniting his obsession, consumed my thoughts. Weeks passed. The intensity of the encounter slowly faded, but the memory remained sharp. I became more cautious, more aware of early warning signs. Many have been a harsh lesson in trusting my instincts, in recognizing when something feels fundamentally wrong. Dating apps suddenly seemed more dangerous, more unpredictable. Each match now carried a hint of potential risk, a reminder of how quickly seemingly normal interactions could transform. My approach became more guarded, more strategic. I found myself analyzing every message, every profile, searching for signs of instability. Looking back, I realized how close I'd come to a potentially dangerous situation. A dinner, a conversation, a moment of vulnerability. These could have led to something much worse. Manny represented a stark reminder of the risks hidden behind charming profiles and carefully crafted messages. The experience changed me, not with fear, but with awareness. Understanding that protection, boundaries, and intuition are crucial in navigating modern romantic interactions. I learned to trust my gut, to not dismiss those early warning signs. I became an advocate for my own safety, unapologetic in setting clear boundaries. Some lessons are learned the hard way, but they're lessons that stick. My encounter with Manny taught me the importance of being cautious, of not ignoring red flags for the sake of politeness. It was a wake-up call, a reminder that danger can wear many masks. As I continue to navigate the world of online dating, I carry these lessons with me. I'm more selective, more in tune with my own instincts. I understand now that it's okay to say no, to walk away when something doesn't feel right. Manny may have been a nightmare, but he also gave me the gift of perspective. It all started normal enough, a match, some witty banter, and a coffee date that went surprisingly well. Little did I know I was walking into a trap that would leave me shaken for months to come. Amanda's profile seemed normal at first glance. Cute photos, a clever bio, and interests that aligned with mine. We hit it off immediately in our chat, and I found myself looking forward to meeting her in person. Our first date at a local cafe exceeded my expectations. She was funny, smart, and easy to talk to. We shared stories about our jobs, hobbies, and favorite travel destinations. By the time we said goodbye, I was already thinking about when I'd see her again. Over the next few weeks, we went on several more dates. Each time I felt more comfortable around Amanda. We explored the city together, trying new restaurants and checking out local events. She was always up for an adventure, and I admired her spontaneity. We had deep conversations about our hopes and dreams, and I started to feel a real connection forming. After about a month of dating, Amanda invited me over to her place for the first time. I was excited to see where she lived and spend some quality time together away from the busy public spaces we'd been frequenting. When I arrived at her apartment, everything seemed normal at first. The place was nicely decorated with artwork on the walls and plants in every corner. Amanda had prepared some snacks and suggested we watch a movie. We settled onto her couch and started the film. About halfway through, I heard a strange noise coming from another room. It sounded like footsteps, followed by a muffled thud. I glanced at Amanda, but she didn't seem to react. A few minutes later, I heard it again. This time, it sounded almost like a whisper. Feeling uneasy, I asked Amanda about the noises. She casually explained that it was probably just her roommate getting ready for work. According to her, this roommate worked night shifts and kept odd hours. It seemed plausible enough, so I tried to relax and focus back on the movie. But as the evening wore on, the noises continued. Sometimes it was a creak or a shuffle, other times it sounded like someone moving furniture. Each time, Amanda had a ready explanation. The neighbors upstairs, the old building settling, her roommate's cat. But I never actually saw or heard anyone else in the apartment. My unease grew with each passing hour. I found myself straining to hear any sounds coming from the other rooms, my mind racing with possibilities. Was there really someone else in the apartment? If so, why hadn't they left for work yet? And why did Amanda seem so unbothered by it all? As the night progressed, I became increasingly anxious to leave. Amanda seemed keen on me staying longer, suggesting we watch another movie or have a nightcap. But the thought of spending more time in that apartment filled me with dread. I made up an excuse about an early morning meeting and quickly said my goodbyes. On the drive home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. I replayed the evening in my mind, trying to make sense of it all. The more I thought about it, the more things didn't add up. Why had Amanda never mentioned her roommate before? Why did she always insist on meeting up rather than having me pick her up? And why had I never met any of her friends or heard her talk about her social life? Over the next few days, my curiosity and concern got the better of me. I started doing some online research, looking up Amanda's address and any public records I could find. What I discovered sent chills down my spine. According to property records, Amanda owned the apartment outright. There was no roommate on the lease. Digging deeper, I stumbled upon some local forums with warnings about a woman matching Amanda's description. The post told harrowing stories of men who had been lured to her apartment through dating apps, only to find themselves in dangerous situations. Apparently, Amanda had a violent ex-boyfriend who was still very much in the picture. She would use her Tinder matches to set up unsuspecting guys, and then her ex would show up to rob or assault them. Reading these accounts, I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. All those strange noises must have been her ex hiding out in the apartment. If I had stayed longer that night or agreed to come back another time, I could have easily become another victim. The realization of how close I'd come to potential danger left me shaken. For weeks afterwards, I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see Amanda or her ex following me. I blocked her number and reported her profile to Tinder, but it did little to ease my anxiety. As time passed and nothing came of it, I slowly began to relax, but the experience left a lasting impact on how I approach online dating. I'm much more cautious now about meeting up with matches and especially about going to their homes. I pay closer attention to any inconsistencies in people's stories or behavior, and I never ignore that gut feeling when something seems off. What started as a promising connection turned into a brush with a potentially dangerous situation. It's an experience I won't soon forget, and one that's made me much more aware of the risks involved in meeting strangers from the internet. It all started on a normal evening when I matched with James. His profile caught my eye immediately. Witty bio, great smile, and photos that showed he was into hiking and rock climbing just like me. We hit it off right away, chatting about our favorite trails and swapping stories about outdoor adventures. After a week of nonstop messaging, we decided to meet up for coffee. I was excited but nervous, as you always are before a first date. The coffee shop was buzzing when I arrived. I spotted James at a corner table, and my nerves melted away as soon as he smiled. He was even more handsome in person, with kind eyes and an easy laugh. We talked for hours, losing track of time as we discovered how much we had in common. As the cafe started to close, James suggested we grab dinner. We found a cozy Italian place nearby and continued our conversation over pasta and wine. The chemistry between us was undeniable, and I couldn't remember the last time I'd enjoyed a date this much. When we finally left the restaurant, the streets were quiet and dark. James offered to walk me home, saying he wanted to make sure I got back safely. I thought it was sweet and agreed, not ready for the night to end. We strolled through the neighborhood, our hands brushing occasionally as we walked side by side. When we reached my apartment building, I turned to thank him for a wonderful evening. That's when things took a bizarre turn. One moment James was there smiling at me, and the next he was gone, vanished into thin air. I blinked, confused, and looked around. The street was empty. There was no sign of James anywhere. It was as if he'd never been there at all. I stood there for a minute trying to process what had just happened. Had I imagined the whole thing? No, that was impossible. I could still smell his cologne, still feel the warmth where our hands had touched. Shaking my head, I went inside, chalking it up to James being socially awkward or having some kind of emergency. The next day, I texted him to make sure everything was okay. No response. I tried not to overthink it, but I couldn't shake the weird feeling the date's ending had left me with. A few days passed, and I started noticing odd things around my apartment. At first, it was small stuff. A book on my nightstand that I didn't remember moving, a mug in the sink I could have sworn I put away. I brushed it off as absent-mindedness, but the incidents kept piling up. One morning, I woke up to find my favorite necklace on the bathroom counter instead of in my jewelry box where I always kept it. That afternoon, I came home to find my laptop open on the coffee table, even though I distinctly remembered closing it before leaving for work. The creeping sense of unease grew stronger. I started double-checking the locks on my doors and windows, but everything always seemed secure. I considered calling the police, but what would I tell them? That I thought someone might be in my apartment because my stuff was slightly out of place. A week after the date with James, I came home to find my bedroom window cracked open. I always kept it locked, especially since my apartment was on the third floor. That was the final straw. I called my landlord first thing the next morning, asking him to check the locks on my door. He came by that afternoon, and as he was examining the lock, he casually mentioned the previous tenant in my apartment. Apparently, the guy had been a bit of a problem and had refused to return his spare key when he moved out. My heart started racing as I asked the landlord to describe the previous tenant. As he spoke, I felt the blood drain from my face. The description matched James perfectly. The guy I'd gone on a date with, the one who disappeared outside my building, had lived in my exact apartment before me. Suddenly, all the strange occurrences of the past week made terrifying sense. James hadn't vanished that night. He'd slipped into the building using his old key. He'd been in my apartment, touching my things, maybe even watching me sleep. I felt sick to my stomach. The landlord must have noticed my distress because he offered to change the locks immediately. I agreed, watching anxiously as he installed a new deadbolt and handed me the only keys. That night, I barely slept. I pushed my heaviest furniture in front of the door and windows, jumping at every little sound. The next day, I went to stay with a friend, too scared to spend another night in my apartment alone. I spent the next week in a constant state of fear and anxiety. I kept expecting to see James around every corner. I deleted Tinder and all my other dating apps, terrified of what might happen if he tried to contact me again. I considered going to the police, but I still had no concrete evidence. Just a series of coincidences and moved objects. Would they even take me seriously? After a week at my friend's place, I hesitantly moved back into my apartment. The locks had been changed, but I couldn't shake the feeling of violation. The space that had once felt like my safe haven now felt tainted. I found myself constantly checking and rechecking the locks, peering out windows, startling at small noises. Weeks went by without incident. I tried to convince myself that it was over, that James had given up once the locks were changed. But every now and then, I'd get a chill down my spine for no apparent reason. Or I'd come home and feel like something was just slightly off, even if I couldn't put my finger on what. So here I am, still in the same apartment, still jumping at shadows. I don't know if I'll ever feel completely safe here again. And I certainly don't think I'll ever look at Tinder the same way. What started as a promising date turned into a nightmare that I'm still trying to wake up from. I was sprawled on my couch, mindlessly swiping through Tinder when I matched with Karen. Her profile caught my eye immediately. Cute pics, witty bio, the whole package. We started chatting, and man, did we hit it off. Karen was funny, flirty, and seemed genuinely interested in me. We bantered back and forth, joking about bad dating experiences and swapping stories about our jobs. It felt easy, natural. Before I knew it, hours had passed, and I was still glued to my phone. As the night wore on, things started heating up. Karen suggested we move our chat off Tinder. I didn't think twice about it. I was having a great time and didn't want the conversation to end. We exchanged numbers and switched to texting. That's when things really took off. The flirting ramped up, and our messages got more and more suggestive. Karen sent a couple of slightly risque pics, nothing too explicit, but definitely attention-grabbing. I reciprocated, caught up in the moment and the excitement of connecting with someone new. I won't lie, it felt good. It had been a while since I clicked with someone like this. Karen was attentive, complimentary, and seemed really into me. We talked about meeting up soon, maybe grabbing drinks that weekend. I was pumped. As I was getting ready for bed, still grinning from our chat, my phone buzzed again. I expected another flirty message from Karen. Instead, my blood ran cold as I read the text. The warm, fun girl I'd been talking to all night was gone. In her place was someone cold and threatening. Karen said she had screenshots of our entire conversation, including the pictures we'd exchanged. If I didn't send her $500 immediately, she'd share everything with my friends, family, and workplace. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How could this be happening? I tried to reason with her, told her there must be some mistake, but Karen wasn't budging. She sent me a screenshot of my Facebook friends list and my workplace's contact info to prove she was serious. Panic set in. All I could think about was my conservative family seeing those messages, my boss getting those pictures. I'd lose my job for sure. In a moment of desperation, I caved. I sent the money, hoping it would make this nightmare go away. Big mistake. As soon as the transfer went through, Karen upped her demands. Now she wanted $1,000 or she'd still share everything. That's when I realized this wasn't going to end. No matter how much I paid, she'd keep coming back for more. I spent the next few hours in a panic, alternating between begging Karen to leave me alone and frantically Googling what to do. That's how I discovered I had fallen victim to an extortion scam. Karen wasn't even a real person. She was likely part of a professional criminal ring that specialized in blackmailing people through dating apps. I felt so stupid. How could I have fallen for this? I always thought I was pretty savvy about online safety, but I let my guard down and gotten burned. The worst part was feeling like I had no one to turn to. I was too embarrassed to tell my friends or family what had happened. After a sleepless night, I knew I had to take action. First, I reported Karen's profile to Tinder and blocked her number. Then I gathered up my courage and filed a police report. The officer I spoke to was surprisingly understanding. He said they'd been seeing a lot of cases like mine lately. Next, I reached out to a nonprofit that supports victims of it. They provided some really helpful resources and connected me with others who'd been through similar experiences. It helped to know I wasn't alone, even if I still felt like an idiot. The next few days were incredibly tense. I jumped every time my phone buzzed, expecting angry messages from friends and family who'd seen the screenshots. But nothing happened. Either Karen was bluffing about having them, or she'd moved on to easier targets once I stopped engaging. I stayed off social media for a while, too paranoid to check if anything had been posted. I made excuses to skip a family dinner, not ready to face anyone yet. At work, I was constantly on edge, sure that any moment my boss would call me into his office to fire me. But as days passed and nothing happened, I slowly started to relax. Maybe I'd dodged a bullet, or maybe Karen had never intended to follow through on her threats at all. A week after the incident, I was starting to feel somewhat normal again. I deleted all dating apps from my phone and was being extra cautious about my online presence. I changed all my passwords and tightened up my social media privacy settings. I still felt embarrassed about the whole thing, but I was trying to be kinder to myself. Yeah, I'd made a mistake, but I wasn't going to let it define me. I started opening up to a couple of close friends about what had happened. Their support meant everything. As I moved forward, I became more aware of just how common these scams are. I started noticing similar stories popping up in news articles and online forums. It was scary to realize how many people fall victim every day. I decided to share my story anonymously in some online support groups. If I could help even one person avoid falling into the same trap, maybe some good could come out of this whole mess. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that you can never be too careful online. People aren't always who they claim to be, and it's all too easy to get caught up in the moment. But life goes on, and I'm not going to let one bad experience stop me from putting myself out there. Just maybe with a bit more caution next time. When I first met Tony, his Tinder profile had caught my eye with his charming smile and witty bio. We had been chatting for a few weeks, and I finally agreed to meet him for drinks at a local bar. The date was going better than I had expected, and as the conversation flowed and the cocktails kept coming, Tony invited me back to his place. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of whether I should accept his invitation. There was something about Tony that seemed a little too good to be true, and I couldn't help but feel a nagging sense of unease. But the alcohol had lowered my guard, and the allure of spending more time with this seemingly perfect stranger was too much to resist. As we walked into Tony's apartment, I immediately noticed his roommate sitting on the couch, mindlessly flipping through channels on the TV. The atmosphere in the room shifted, and the tension between Tony and his roommate was palpable. I tried to break the ice by introducing myself, but the roommate barely acknowledged my presence, only giving me a curt nod before turning back to the screen. Tony led me to the kitchen, where he poured us each another drink. As we sipped our cocktails, the roommate began making cryptic comments about Tony's past relationships. He mentioned how Tony had a habit of bringing home unsuspecting girls and how things never ended well. I tried to laugh it off, thinking the roommate was just trying to get under Tony's skin, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in the pit of my stomach. As the evening wore on, the roommate's comments became more pointed and unsettling. He made references to Tony's dark side and hinted at some sort of troubled past. Tony grew increasingly agitated, and I could see the anger simmering just beneath the surface. The energy in the room was suffocating, and I found myself wishing I had never agreed to come back to this apartment. At one point, I excused myself to use the bathroom, desperate for a moment of solitude. As I walked down the hallway, I had overheard Tony and his roommate arguing in hushed tones. I couldn't make out everything they were saying, but I distinctly heard the roommate ask if I was worth the trouble. Tony's response was muffled, but the tone of his voice sent a chill down my spine. I quickly used the bathroom and returned to the living room, my heart racing. The tension in the room had reached a boiling point. I knew I needed to get out of there. I made an excuse about having an early morning meeting and asked Tony to call me a cab. Tony walked me outside, apologizing for his roommate's behavior. He said the roommate was just going through a rough time and didn't mean anything by it. I nodded, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. As I climbed into the cab, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I knew I had dodged a bullet, but I couldn't help but wonder what would have happened if I had stayed the night. The memory of the roommate's cryptic comments and the overheard argument played over and over in my mind, leaving me feeling unsettled and on edge. In the days that followed, I tried to put the experience behind me. I threw myself into work and spent time with friends, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. I found myself looking over my shoulder when I walked home at night and double-checking the locks on my doors. A few weeks later, I saw a news report about a woman who had gone missing after going on a Tinder date. The description of the man she was last seen with sounded eerily similar to Tony. I felt sick to my stomach as I realized how close I had come to being in that woman's position. I deleted my Tinder account that day and tried to move on with my life, but the experience with Tony and his roommate had changed me. I was more cautious, more guarded. I found myself questioning the motives of every man I met, wondering what secrets they might be hiding beneath the surface. As time passed, the memory of that night began to fade, but I never forgot the lesson I had learned. In a world where danger can lurk behind even the most charming smile, it's essential to trust your instincts and prioritize your own safety above all else. Still, I couldn't help but wonder what had become of Tony and his mysterious roommate. Had they been involved in the disappearance of that other Tinder date? Or was it all just a terrible coincidence? The questions haunted me, and I found myself occasionally searching the news for any updates, hoping to find some closure. But the truth remained elusive, and the uncertainty only added to the unease I felt. I knew that I had been lucky to escape that night unharmed, but the scars of the experience remained. It was a reminder that in the world of online dating, nothing is ever as it seems, and that sometimes the most charming of strangers can harbor the darkest of secrets. These questions will likely haunt me for the rest of my life, a constant reminder of the importance of being vigilant and trusting your gut. But in the end, I know that I did the right thing. I prioritized my safety, and that decision may have saved my life. And while the memory of that night will always be a painful one, it has also made me stronger, more resilient, and more cautious in the face of the unknown. I should have known something was off the moment Nora suggested we leave the cozy cafe and go back to her place for a nightcap. But after such an amazing first date, my better judgment was clouded by the intoxicating feeling of finally connecting with someone special. Our evening had started off perfectly. Nora's profile had immediately caught my eye on Tinder. She was stunning, with a smile that could light up a room and a bio that showcased her sharp wit and adventurous spirit. We had matched instantly and spent the next few days texting back and forth, our conversation flowing effortlessly. When we finally met up for our first date, I was already smitten. Nora was even more beautiful in person, and her presence was magnetic. We settled into a corner table at the cafe, sipping on lattes and trading stories about our lives. The hours flew by as we discovered shared passions for travel, music, and terrible reality TV shows. As the cafe started to close up for the night, Nora leaned in close and suggested we continue our conversation at her place. I hesitated for a moment, but the look in her eyes and the electricity between us was too powerful to resist. We walked the short distance to her apartment, our hands brushing against each other, the anticipation building. Once inside her place, Nora expertly poured us each a glass of wine, and we settled on her plush couch. The conversation picked up right where it had left off, and I found myself getting lost in her captivating stories and infectious laughter. She had a way of making me feel like the most interesting person in the world. As the night wore on and the wine flowed, Nora's hand found its way to my leg, sending cold chills down my spine. Our faces were inches apart, and I could feel the heat between us. Just as I leaned in to close the distance, Nora suddenly pulled back, a mischievous grin on her face. She excused herself to the restroom, leaving me slightly dazed and confused. When she returned a few minutes later, something seemed slightly off. Her demeanor had shifted, and there was a coolness to her gaze that hadn't been there before. But I brushed it aside, chalking it up to the effects of the alcohol and my own nerves. It wasn't until much later, as I was getting ready to leave, that I realized my wallet was missing from my back pocket. I frantically searched Nora's apartment, retracing my steps, but it was nowhere to be found. A sinking feeling settled in my stomach as the realization dawned on me. I had been robbed. Nora played the concerned and sympathetic host, offering to help me look for the wallet and even suggesting we call the police. But something in her demeanor made me hesitant to trust her. I made up an excuse about needing to leave and hurriedly exited the apartment, my mind racing with the implications of what had just happened. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache, both from the wine and the stress of the previous night's events. As I checked my phone, the true extent of Nora's betrayal became clear. Multiple notifications from my bank and credit card companies alerted me to a series of fraudulent charges, maxing out several of my cards. Thousands of dollars had been drained from my accounts, all within the span of a few hours after I left Nora's place. It was an absolute nightmare, and I felt completely violated. How could I have been so dumb? I immediately called the credit card companies to report the fraud and cancel the cards, then filed a police report. But deep down, I knew the chances of getting my money back or catching Nora were slim. She had clearly been planning this scam for a while and had expertly covered her tracks. A quick search online revealed that Nora was a known con artist with multiple victims across various dating apps. She had perfected the art of luring in unsuspecting men, building up their trust, and then robbing them blind. I was just the latest in a long line of her targets. The financial fallout was significant, and it took me months to get my accounts and credit back in order. But the emotional toll was even worse. I replayed every moment of our date in my mind, searching for any signs that I had missed, but everything had seemed so genuine and natural at the time. I was consumed by a mix of anger, shame, and disbelief. How could I have fallen for such an obvious scam? I had always prided myself on being cautious and level-headed, but Nora had managed to disarm me completely with her charm and fake sincerity. The experience left me deeply shaken and wary of the entire online dating scene. I deleted all my dating apps and retreated into myself, too embarrassed and distrustful to even consider meeting someone new. The thought of opening up to another person, only to be betrayed and taken advantage of again, was too much to bear. It took a long time for me to start healing from the trauma of that night. I had to learn to forgive myself for being deceived and to slowly rebuild my sense of trust and confidence. It wasn't easy, and there were many moments when I wanted to give up on the idea of finding love altogether. But gradually, with the support of friends and family, I started to come out of my shell again. I realized that one horrible experience with a con artist didn't define me or my worth. I knew I had to be more cautious going forward, but I refused to let Nora's actions control my life or my happiness. I'm still navigating the ups and downs of dating, but I'm doing it on my own terms, with my eyes wide open and my heart a little more guarded. I may never fully recover the money or the innocence I lost that night, but I've gained a strength and resilience that I never knew I had. And for that, in a twisted way, I'm almost grateful to Nora. She showed me what I'm truly capable of surviving. Ethan's profile seemed normal enough. A few photos of him smiling, a short bio that mentioned his love for hiking and trying new restaurants. When we matched, he messaged me right away and we struck up a conversation. At first, Ethan seemed like a nice guy. He was friendly and engaging, and we had a lot in common. We talked of our favorite books and movies, and he made me laugh with his witty jokes. After a few days of messaging, he suggested we meet up for coffee. I agreed, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. We met at a local cafe on a Saturday afternoon. Ethan was already there when I arrived, waving enthusiastically from a corner table. He looked like his photos, which was a relief, but there was something about his demeanor that felt a bit off. Throughout the date, Ethan was overly eager, almost pushy. He kept leaning in close, invading my personal space, and his questions seemed to get more and more personal as time went on. He asked about my family, my work, and even my daily routines. I tried to steer the conversation back to more neutral topics, but he always found a way to bring it back to me. After an hour, I made an excuse about needing to meet a friend and left. As I walked away, I felt a sense of unease that I couldn't quite explain. I chalked it up to first date jitters and tried to brush it off. That night, my phone started blowing up with messages from Ethan. He told me how much he enjoyed our date and how he couldn't wait to see me again. At first, I thought it was sweet, but as the messages kept coming hour after hour, I started to feel uncomfortable. The next day, Ethan's texts became even more frequent. He asked what I was doing, where I was going, who I was with. When I didn't respond right away, He would send follow-up messages, asking if I was okay or if I was ignoring him. I tried to be polite but distant, hoping he would get the hint. A few days later, I was at work when I heard a commotion at the front desk. To my shock, it was Ethan, holding a bouquet of flowers and grinning from ear to ear. He had somehow found out where I worked, even though I had never told him. My coworkers were all staring, and I could feel my face turning red with embarrassment. I pulled Ethan aside and asked him what he was doing. He said he just wanted to surprise me and that he couldn't stop thinking about me. I was so taken aback that I didn't know what to say. I mumbled something about being busy with work and rushed back to my desk feeling shaken. Over the next few weeks, Ethan's behavior became more and more unsettling. He started sending me photos of places I went to regularly, like my favorite coffee shop and the park near my apartment. He would make comments about my friends and family, dropping details that I had never shared with him. I started to feel like I was being watched all the time. I would see Ethan's car parked near my apartment building, or I would catch a glimpse of him across the street when I was out with friends. I tried to convince myself that I was just being paranoid, but deep down, I knew something was very wrong. One night, I came home from work to find a package waiting for me on my doorstep. Inside was a scrapbook filled with photos of me, photos that had been taken without my knowledge. There were pictures of me at work, at the grocery store, even in my own apartment. I felt sick to my stomach as I flipped through the pages, realizing the extent of Ethan's obsession. I knew I needed to do something, but I was afraid of what Ethan might do if I confronted him directly. I started by blocking his number and social media accounts, but he always seemed to find new ways to contact me. He would leave notes on my car, send packages to my work, and even try to friend my coworkers on Facebook. My daily life became a nightmare. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, jumping at every noise. I couldn't sleep at night, and I was having panic attacks on a regular basis. I changed my routines, took different routes to work, and even considered moving to a new apartment. But no matter what I did, Ethan always seemed to be one step ahead. My friends and family noticed the change in my behavior, but I was too ashamed to tell them what was going on. I made excuses for my jumpiness and withdrawn behavior, but I could tell they were worried about me. One evening, I was out with a group of friends when I saw Ethan across the street watching me. My heart started racing and I felt like I couldn't breathe. I made an excuse to leave early and rushed home, locking all the doors and windows. That night, I woke up to the sound of someone trying to open my front door. I could hear Ethan's voice calling my name and begging me to let him in. I was paralyzed with fear, huddled in my bed with my phone clutched in my hand. After what felt like hours, I finally worked up the courage to call the police. When the officers arrived, they found Ethan still outside my apartment, a crazed look in his eyes. He was arrested on the spot and charged with stalking and harassment. As I watched the police car drive away, I felt a mix of relief and lingering fear. Even though Ethan was gone, I couldn't shake the feeling of vulnerability. I learned more about Ethan's background. He had a history of obsessive behavior and had been in trouble before for stalking other women. I was shocked to discover how easily he had been able to find out so much information about me just from our brief interactions online and during our one date. I'm struck by how quickly things escalated from a seemingly innocent Tinder match to a full-blown nightmare. It's a stark reminder of the potential dangers lurking in the world of online dating, and the importance of trusting your instincts when something doesn't feel right. Nana's bio was witty, and her photo showed a girl with a bright smile and adventurous spirit. We matched, and soon we were messaging back and forth. Our conversations were effortless from the start. We shared similar tastes in music and movies, and she had a way of making me laugh with her quick comebacks. After a few days of texting, we decided to meet up for coffee. I was a bundle of nerves as I walked into the cafe, but as soon as I saw her, my anxiety melted away. Now I was even prettier in person, with warm brown eyes and a contagious laugh. We talked for hours, losing track of time as we shared stories about our families, our jobs, and our dreams. By the time we left the cafe, I felt like I'd known her for years. Eager to see each other again, we planned a proper dinner date for the following weekend. I spent the whole week looking forward to it, replaying our first meeting in my mind and imagining how great our second date would be. When Saturday night finally arrived, I put on my favorite shirt and headed to the restaurant Nana had chosen. It was a trendy place downtown with dim lighting and intimate atmosphere. Nana was already there when I arrived, looking stunning in a red dress that made my heart skip a beat. We ordered drinks and appetizers, falling into easy conversation just like before. Nod asked me about my childhood, and I found myself sharing stories I hadn't thought about in years. She seemed genuinely interested, leaning in close and nodding as I spoke. As we moved on to our main course, I noticed Nana glancing at her phone more frequently. At first, I didn't think much of it. We all get caught up checking our messages sometimes, right? But as the night wore on, it became more noticeable. She looked down at her phone, then quickly back up at me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I tried to ignore it, focusing instead on how much I was enjoying her company. We talked about our favorite travel destinations, and Nana's eyes lit up as she described a trip to Japan she'd taken last year. I found myself imagining us traveling together, exploring new places side by side. About halfway through the meal, I excused myself to use the restroom. As I stood up, I caught a glimpse of something that made my blood run cold. Nana's phone was propped up against her water glass, angled directly towards my seat. The red recording light was blinking steadily. My mind raced as I walked to the restroom. Had she been recording our entire date? Why would she do that? I stood in front of the mirror, trying to calm my racing heart and figure out what to do next. When I returned to the table, Nana acted as if nothing was amiss. She smiled brightly and asked if I wanted to share a dessert. I hesitated, then decided to confront her about what I had seen. I asked her directly if she had been recording our date. The change in Nana's demeanor was instant. Her smile faltered, and a look of panic flashed across her face. She denied everything, saying I must have been mistaken. But her eyes darted nervously, and she quickly grabbed her phone, shoving it into her purse. The rest of the date was painfully awkward. The easy conversation we'd enjoyed earlier evaporated, replaced by tense silence and stilted small talk. I couldn't wait for it to be over. When the bill came, we split it without discussion, and I declined Nana's half-hearted suggestion of going for a walk. As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling of violation. Why did she record our date? What was she planning to do with the footage? I tossed and turned, replaying every moment of the evening in my mind, wondering if I'd missed any other red flags. The next morning, I woke up to find that Nana had unmatched me on Tinder. When I searched for her profile, it was gone without a trace. It was as if she'd never existed. Over the next few days, I felt increasingly uneasy. I considered reporting her to Tinder, but I didn't have any concrete evidence. It was just my word against hers. I found myself jumping every time my phone buzzed, half expecting to see the recording pop up online somewhere. I couldn't help but wonder if Nana had done this before. Were there other unsuspecting dates out there unknowingly starring in her secret recordings? The thought made me feel sick. A week after the date, I was scrolling through my social media when I saw something that made my heart stop. A mutual friend had shared a video from a new prank channel on YouTube. The thumbnail showed a familiar restaurant interior, and there, sitting at a table, was me. With shaking hands, I clicked on the video. It was heavily edited, cutting together moments from our date to make me look foolish and desperate. My stomach churned as I watched myself on screen, oblivious to the fact that I was being recorded. The comment section was full of people laughing at my expense, making fun of my awkward moments and overanalyzing my every word and gesture. I felt exposed and humiliated. I reported the video immediately, but the damage was already done. It had thousands of views and was being shared across multiple platforms. I spent the next few days in a daze, fielding concerned messages from friends who had seen the video and trying to explain the situation to my family. The video was eventually taken down, but the experience left me shaken. I deleted my Tinder account and took a long break from dating altogether. The trust I once had in meeting new people was shattered. As for Nana, I never heard from her again. Sometimes I wonder if she's still out there, luring unsuspecting dates into her twisted pranks. I hope that by sharing my story, I can help others avoid falling into the same trap. The whole experience taught me a harsh lesson about the risks of online dating. While I haven't given up on finding a connection, I'm much more careful now. After all, you never know who might be hiding behind that perfect profile picture. I never imagined a Tinder match could go so wrong. It was just another Friday night, and I was scrolling through my phone, bored and lonely. That's when I came across Chig's profile. His photos caught my eye immediately. He had this confident smile and piercing blue eyes that seemed to look right through the screen. But it was his bio that really hooked me. It was like he pulled the thoughts straight out of my head, same taste in music, favorite books, even the same TV shows I loved. I swiped right without hesitation, and we matched instantly. The conversation flowed effortlessly from the start. We messaged back and forth for hours that first night, talking about everything and nothing. It felt like I'd known him for years. Over the next few days, our chats only got better. He was funny, charming, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. When Chigs suggested we meet up, I didn't even hesitate. We agreed on a trendy bar downtown for the following Friday night. I spent all week looking forward to it, daydreaming about how perfect it would be. The night of our date arrived, and I put extra effort into getting ready. I chose my favorite outfit, the one that always made me feel confident. As I walked into the bar, my heart was racing with excitement and nerves. I spotted Chigs right away. He looked even better in person. He greeted me with a warm hug and that dazzling smile I'd seen in his photos. We found a cozy booth and ordered our first round of drinks. The conversation picked up right where we left off online. Chigs had this way of making me feel like the most interesting person in the room. He laughed at all my jokes and seemed fascinated by everything I had to say. I couldn't believe how well we clicked. As we finished our first drinks, Chigs suggested another round. I agreed, still riding the high of how well things were going. He insisted on paying, saying he wanted to treat me. Our second drinks arrived quickly, and the night continued to flow smoothly. It was during our third round that I started to notice something off. Chigs kept bringing up drinking games or suggesting shots. Each time I tried to slow down or stick to water, he'd pout or make a comment about how the night was young. I didn't want to seem like a party pooper, so I went along with it, ignoring the uneasy feeling growing in my stomach. By the fourth round, my head was spinning. The room seemed to tilt and sway, and I was having trouble focusing on what Chigs was saying. I realized I'd lost track of how much I'd had to drink. When I mentioned feeling tipsy, Chigs just laughed it off and ordered another round. I tried to excuse myself to the bathroom, needing a moment to clear my head. As I stood up, I stumbled, nearly falling. Chigs caught my arm, his grip surprisingly tight. He insisted on helping me to the restroom, saying he was worried about me. His concern felt off somehow, almost predatory. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face, trying to sober up. My reflection in the mirror looked pale and unfocused. That's when the reality of the situation hit me. I was way too drunk, and Chigs had been pushing drinks on me all night. Fear started to creep in as I realized how vulnerable I was. I fumbled with my phone, trying to text my roommate for help. My fingers felt clumsy, and it took several attempts to type out a coherent message. Just as I hit send, there was a knock at the door. Chigs' voice came through, asking if I was okay. The concern in his tone didn't match the unease I felt. Stepping out of the bathroom, I found Chigs waiting right outside. He put his arm around me, guiding me back to our table. I tried to say I wanted to go home, but the words came out slurred. Chigs just smiled and said we should have one more drink to end the night. Back at the table, I found 2 shot glasses waiting. My stomach lurched at the sight. Chigs picked one up, encouraging me to do the same. I shook my head, pushing the glass away. For the first time that night, I saw a flash of anger cross his face. He leaned in close, his breath hot on my ear, and whispered that I was being no fun. Just then, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I looked up to see my roommate standing there, concern etched on her face. Relief washed over me as I realized my text had gotten through. My roommate helped me up, saying she was here to take me home. Chigs protested, insisting he could take care of me, but my roommate firmly shut him down. As we left the bar, I leaned heavily on my roommate, my legs unsteady. The cool night air hit me and I felt sick. In the cab ride home, the full weight of what had almost happened started to sink in. Tears streamed down my face as I recounted the night to my roommate. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a sense of shame. I checked my phone to find several messages from Chigs, alternating between apologies and accusations. I blocked his number without responding. For days after, I couldn't shake the feeling of violation. Even though nothing had technically happened, I felt betrayed and used. What had started as a promising connection had turned into a nightmare. I kept replaying the night in my head, wondering how I'd missed the red flags. Months later, I still think about that night sometimes, about how differently things could have gone if my roommate hadn't shown up. It's a stark reminder of the risks that can come with online dating. But it's also a reminder of the importance of trusting your instincts and having a good support system. I never heard from Chigs again, and I hope I never do. That night changed me, made me more aware of my surroundings and more assertive about my boundaries. It's not a lesson I wanted to learn, but it's one I'll never forget. I swiped right on Christelle's profile, captivated by her vibrant smile and witty bio. We hit it off immediately, exchanging playful banter and discovering shared interests. After a week of great conversations, we decided to meet for coffee. The first date exceeded my expectations. Christelle was even more charming in person, with a contagious laugh and an ability to make me feel at ease. We talked for hours, losing track of time as we shared stories about our lives, dreams, and adventures. When we finally parted ways, I felt a genuine connection and couldn't wait to see her again. Over the next few days, we texted regularly. Christelle sent sweet good morning messages and asked about my day. She'd share funny memes that made me smile. It felt like the start of something special. We made plans for a second date, and I found myself looking forward to it all week. But then things began to shift. The frequency of Christelle's texts increased dramatically. She'd message me constantly, expecting immediate responses. If I took too long to reply, she'd send follow-ups asking if everything was okay. At first, I thought she was just enthusiastic, but it quickly became overwhelming. One day, I had back-to-back meetings at work and couldn't check my phone for several hours. When I finally did, I was stunned to find 37 unread messages from Christelle. They started off normal, but gradually became more frantic and accusatory. She demanded to know where I was and who I was with, convinced I was ignoring her on purpose. I tried to explain that I'd simply been busy, but Christelle wasn't satisfied. She insisted I was lying and probably out with other girls. Her sudden intensity caught me off guard. I told her she was overreacting, and this behavior wasn't okay. She apologized profusely, promising it wouldn't happen again. Against my better judgment, I decided to give her another chance. For a few days, things seemed to calm down. But then the flood of messages resumed. Christelle would text me from the moment she woke up until late at night. She'd get upset if my replies weren't prompt or detailed enough. It felt like she was monitoring my every move, demanding constant attention and reassurance. I realized this had gone beyond normal dating behavior into something more sinister. When I gently suggested that we should slow things down, Christelle exploded. She accused me of leading her on and playing with her emotions. The messages turned nasty and threatening, filled with wild mood swings between professions of love and vicious insults. Deciding I'd had enough, I sent Christelle a firm but polite text explaining that we weren't compatible and wishing her the best. This triggered an absolute meltdown. My phone was inundated with hundreds of unhinged messages, alternating between desperate pleas, cruel jabs, and ominous threats. I blocked her number, hoping that would be the end of it. But Christelle was relentless. She started messaging me on every social media platform imaginable. When I blocked those accounts, she created new ones to circumvent it. There seemed to be no escape from her digital onslaught. Things escalated further when Christelle somehow obtained my friend's contact information. She reached out to them, spinning elaborate tales about how I had wronged her. She painted me as a manipulative player who used women and warned them to stay away. My friends were unsettled and began asking questions, wondering what I'd gotten myself into. The situation took an even darker turn one evening I returned home from work. As I approached my apartment, I noticed something odd about my car. Getting closer, I realized it was covered in dozens of post-it notes. My heart raced as I read the messages scrawled on them. Some proclaimed Christelle's undying love, while others contained graphic threats about what she'd do if I didn't take her back. Handshaking, I gathered up all the notes as evidence and called the police. They took my statement and documented the incident, but said there wasn't much they could do at that point. They advised me to stay vigilant and contact them if anything else happened. I felt helpless and afraid, realizing how quickly this Tinder match had turned into a real-life threat. For weeks, I lived in constant fear. I varied my daily routines, always looking over my shoulder to see if I was being followed. I installed new locks on my apartment door and the curtains drawn. Every unexpected noise made me jump. I couldn't shake the feeling that Christelle was out there, watching and waiting. The harassment continued in waves. Some days would be quiet, lulling me into a false sense of security. Then suddenly, I'd be hit with a barrage of new messages from unfamiliar numbers or find more notes left on my car. Each time the police said they couldn't do much without more concrete evidence or direct threats. After about a month of this nightmare, things finally began to taper off. The messages became less frequent and I stopped finding notes on my car. I allowed myself to hope that maybe, just maybe, Christelle had given up or moved on to someone new. As the weeks passed without incident, I slowly started to relax. I unblocked some of my social media accounts and began to reclaim my life. But the experience left a lasting impact. I found myself hesitant to trust, always watching for red flags and new interactions. It's been 3 months since I last heard from Christelle. While I want to believe it's over for good, part of me remains on guard. I started seeing someone new recently, a friend of a friend, but I'm taking things incredibly slow. The memory of how quickly things spiraled with Christelle is never far from my mind. This Tinder horror story taught me that you can never truly know someone based on a profile and a few good conversations. What started as a promising connection turned into a terrifying ordeal that upended my life. While I haven't sworn off dating apps entirely, I approach them with a much more cautious eye now, and I'll never ignore those early warning signs again, no matter how charming someone might seem at first. His name was Rahul, 32, software engineer with a profile full of hiking photos and witty one-liners. We matched on a Tuesday and spent the next few days messaging back and forth. He seemed funny, smart, and refreshingly normal compared to some of the other guys I'd encountered on the app. By Friday, we agreed to meet for dinner. I was actually looking forward to it, a rarity in the often disappointing world of online dating. I spent more time than usual getting ready, trying on different outfits, and redoing my makeup twice. I even texted my roommate to let her know where I was going, just in case. The restaurant Rahul picked was a cozy Italian place downtown, string lights twinkling in the windows. He was already there when I arrived, standing up to greet me with a warm smile. He looked just like his photos, tall, with kind brown eyes and a neatly trimmed beard. Dinner started off well. We ordered wine and pasta, chatting easily about our jobs and hobbies. Rahul was charming and attentive, asking thoughtful questions and laughing at my jokes. By the time we finished our meals, I was feeling relaxed and maybe even a little giddy from the wine. When the check came, Rahul insisted on paying. I tried to protest, but he waved me off with a grin. As we walked out of the restaurant, he offered to drive me home. I hesitated for a moment. I usually preferred to take an Uber after first dates, but it was getting late and surge pricing would be high. Plus, Rahul had been nothing but gentlemanly all evening, so I agreed and climbed into his sleek black sedan. At first, everything seemed fine. We continued our conversation from dinner as Rahul navigated through the city streets towards my neighborhood. He asked about my apartment, how long I'd lived there, if I liked the area. Normal small talk. But as we got closer to my place, I started to notice a shift in Rahul's demeanor. His responses became shorter, more clipped. He kept glancing over at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. An uneasy feeling started to creep over me. We were about a mile from my apartment when it happened. Rahul suddenly pulled the car over to the curb, bringing us to an abrupt stop on a quiet, dimly lit street. My heart began to race as he turned to face me. "I want to talk for a minute before I drop you off," he said, his voice low and intense. Alarm bells were ringing in my head. I told him I'd rather just go home. It was late, I was tired. But Rahul didn't seem to hear me. Or maybe he just didn't care. In an instant, his whole demeanor changed. The charming, easygoing guy from dinner was gone, replaced by someone cold and angry. He locked the car doors with a loud click that made me jump. Then the interrogation began. Why didn't I want to keep talking? Didn't I like him? What was wrong with him? Was I seeing other guys? Each question came faster and more aggressively than the last. I was trapped. Trapped in this car with a man I barely knew, who was becoming more hostile by the second. I tried to stay calm to reason with him. I explained again that I just wanted to go home. It was nothing personal. But Rahul wasn't listening. He accused me of leading him on, of wasting his time. His eyes were cold and hard as he stared at me, waiting for answers I couldn't give him. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone. It was my lifeline, my only way out of this nightmare. I told Rahul that if he didn't take me home right now, I was calling the police. Time seemed to stand still as I waited for his response. Would he let me go, or would things escalate even further? I held my breath, finger hovering over the emergency call button. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Rahul put the car in drive. He didn't say a word as he peeled away from the curb, tires squealing on the pavement. The rest of the ride was agonizing. We sat in tense silence, the only sound the hum of the engine and my own racing heartbeat. I was on high alert, ready to dial 911 at the slightest provocation. When we finally reached my building, I didn't wait for Rahul to come to a full stop. I flung open the door and bolted, not even bothering to say goodbye. I ran to my apartment, fumbling with my keys in my haste to get inside. Once safely in my home, the full weight of what had just happened hit me. I slumped against the door, tears streaming down my face. I was overwhelmed with relief, fear, and anger all at once. With shaking hands, I blocked Rahul's number and reported him on Tinder. Then I called my roommate, who rushed home to be with me. We stayed up late into the night, talking through what had happened and making plans to ensure my safety going forward. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and sleepless nights. Every car that drove by made me tense up. Every knock at the door sent my heart racing. I kept replaying the incident in my mind, wondering if there were warning signs I'd missed. My friends rallied around me, offering support and helping me feel safe again. One even stayed over for a few nights, just so I wouldn't be alone. Slowly but surely, I started to regain my footing. A week has passed now, and while I'm still shaken, I'm also angry. Angry that Rahul thought he could treat me that way. Angry that what should have been a fun evening turned into a terrifying ordeal. I've decided to take a break from dating apps for a while. When I do feel ready to try again, I'll be much more cautious. No more getting in cars with strangers, no matter how nice they seem over dinner. For now, I'm focusing on healing and moving forward. It's not easy, but I'm determined not to let one bad experience define me or my approach to dating. I know there are good people out there. I just need to be more careful about finding them. It all started on a mundane Tuesday evening when I found myself mindlessly swiping through profiles, fighting off boredom and a nagging feeling of loneliness. That's when Hannah's profile popped up, and everything changed. Her pictures immediately caught my eye. Wild, curly hair framed a face with a mischievous smile. Each photo showcased a different adventure. Skydiving, hiking in exotic locations, dancing at music festivals. Her bio was short but intriguing. Always chasing the next thrill. Want to join me? I swiped right without hesitation, and to my surprise, we matched instantly. Hannah messaged first, asking about my own adventures. I felt a bit intimidated, given my relatively tame lifestyle, but I shared a few stories from my backpacking trip through Europe. Our conversation flowed easily over the next few days. Hannah told me about her job as a travel blogger, describing breathtaking landscapes and adrenaline-pumping experiences. She had a way of making every story sound exciting, even something as simple as trying street food in a new city. I found myself constantly checking my phone, eager for her next message. There was something addictive about her energy, even through text. She seemed to live life at full speed, always ready for the next big thing. After about a week of messaging, Hannah suggested we meet in person. I was definitely interested, but also a bit nervous. Her intensity was exciting, but also slightly overwhelming. We made plans to grab drinks that weekend at a trendy bar downtown. The day before our planned date, I received an unexpected message from Hannah. She said she was feeling spontaneous and had a crazy idea. There was a music festival happening a few hours away, and she thought it would be fun to road trip there together. She painted a picture of us dancing under the stars, getting to know each other away from the city's distractions. Part of me was tempted. It sounded like an adventure, the kind of story you tell for years to come, but a larger part felt uneasy. This was supposed to be our first meeting, and suddenly she wanted us to travel together. It seemed like a big leap. I spent hours debating what to do. The rational part of my brain kept throwing up red flags, but another part didn't want to miss out on what could be an amazing experience. In the end, I decided to trust my gut. I messaged Hannah back, politely declining and citing work commitments I couldn't get out of. Her response was quick and seemed understanding, but I detected a note of disappointment. She suggested rescheduling our drinks for another time, and I agreed, though I was starting to feel a bit weirded out by the whole situation. Our messaging slowed down after that. Hannah would occasionally send photos from her travels, and I responded with generic comments, but the excitement of our early conversations had faded. Eventually, the messages stopped altogether. I mostly forgot about Hannah until about a month later. I was scrolling through my Facebook feed when a post from the local news caught my eye. It was a warning about a series of robberies in the area. The victims were all men who had been lured to remote locations by a woman they met online. As I read the article, a chill ran down my spine. The suspect was described as a woman in her late 20s with curly hair. The victims reported being charmed by her stories of adventure and spontaneity. Once they agreed to meet her in a secluded spot, they were robbed of cash, phones, and credit cards, then left stranded. My mind immediately went to Hannah. The description matched her perfectly, and the method sounded eerily similar to what she had suggested to me. I found myself going back through our old messages, scrutinizing every word for clues I might have missed. Had she been trying to lure me into a trap? Was I almost one of those victims? The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that I had narrowly avoided a dangerous situation. I considered reporting my suspicions to the police, but I hesitated. I didn't have any concrete evidence, just a hunch based on a vague description. Plus, I wasn't even sure if Hannah was her real name or if any of the information she had given me was true. For days, I wrestled with what to do. I felt guilty, wondering if my silence could lead to someone else falling victim. But I also worried about making accusations without proof. In the end, I decided to submit an anonymous tip to the police hotline, providing Hannah's profile information and a brief account of our interactions. Weeks passed and I heard nothing more about the robberies. I found myself constantly checking the local news, both dreading and hoping to see an update. Had they caught the culprit? Was it really Hannah, or had my imagination run wild? The uncertainty was maddening. I replay our conversations in my head, second-guessing every interaction. Had there been red flags I missed? Should I have been more cautious from the beginning? Eventually, I confided in a close friend of the whole experience. To my surprise, he had a similar story. He had matched with a woman who suggested an impromptu camping trip for their first date. Unlike me, he had agreed, only to have her cancel at the last minute. Nappy wondered if he had also narrowly avoided a dangerous situation. The experience with Hannah changed me, making me more aware of the potential risks lurking behind seemingly innocent interactions. It was a harsh reminder that in the digital age, not everything is as it appears, and sometimes trusting your gut can make all the difference. His profile caught my eye, great smile, witty bio, and we seemed to have a lot in common. We hit it off right away, messaging back and forth for a few days before deciding to meet up for coffee. Our first date went surprisingly well. Jacob was even more charming in person, with an easy laugh and genuine interest in getting to know me. We talked for hours about our shared love of hiking, true crime podcasts, and trying new restaurants. By the end of the night, I was already looking forward to seeing him again. We met up for dinner the following weekend at a cozy Italian place downtown. The conversation flowed naturally at first as we caught up on our week. Jacob asked about my job and family, sharing funny stories about his own. I found myself relaxing, thinking I might have found someone special. But then things took a strange turn. Jacob started asking oddly specific questions about my feet. Did I get pedicures often? What was my shoe size? How often did I go barefoot? I tried to laugh it off and change the subject, but he kept steering the conversation back. Next, he wanted to know if I'd ever stepped on small objects or insects. Had I crushed fruit with my bare feet? Would I consider walking on someone's back? My stomach churned as I realized where this might be heading. I made an excuse about needing to use the restroom and texted a friend to call me with a fake emergency. When I returned to the table, I told Jacob I had to leave due to a family situation. He seemed disappointed but understanding. As I gathered my things, Jacob blurted out that he had a crush fetish. He said he was looking for someone to step on things for him and asked if I'd be interested in trying it out. I was stunned, fumbling for a response. I mumbled something about needing to think about it and tried to leave quickly. But Jacob grabbed my arm, his demeanor changing completely. He accused me of being closed-minded and judgmental. His grip tightened as his voice got louder, saying I owed him a chance, and was discriminating against his kink. Other diners were starting to stare. I wrenched my arm free and practically ran out of the restaurant, Jacob shouting after me. My hands shook as I fumbled with my car keys, desperate to get away. For days afterward, I was on edge. Every notification on my phone sent a jolt of panic through me. I kept replaying the incident, wondering if I'd missed any red flags earlier on. Looking back, there were subtle signs. Jacob had made a few odd comments about my feet early in our chats. He'd asked about my shoe collection and complimented my delicate feet in a beach photo. At the time, I brushed it off, but now I saw how he'd been testing the waters. I also realized he'd been pretty vague about his own interests and background. Most of our conversations had centered around me, with Jacob asking lots of questions but revealing little about himself. It was a classic tactic for hiding something. The incident left me shaken for weeks. I found myself being overly suspicious of new people, always wondering what dark secrets they might be hiding. It took time to find a healthy balance between caution and openness. I did end up reporting Jacob to Tinder, though I'm not sure what came of it. Part of me felt bad about potentially outing his fetish, but his aggressive reaction when I tried to leave was completely unacceptable. No one should feel unsafe or pressured like that. For a long time, I second guessed my reaction that night. Maybe I'd overreacted. Was I being too judgmental? But friends assured me I'd done the right thing by trusting my gut and prioritizing my safety. It took a while before I felt comfortable using dating apps again. Now I'm much more cautious about meeting people from online. I do more vetting beforehand and always meet in very public places. That experience with Jacob was definitely eye-opening. It made me realize how quickly things can go south, even when someone seems normal at first. I'm glad I trusted my instincts and got out of there when I did. These days, I'm much better at spotting red flags in the early stages of dating. I pay close attention to how someone reacts when I set a boundary or say no to something. A respectful person will back off immediately. I'm also more upfront about my own expectations and deal breakers. Better to weed out incompatibilities early on than waste time or end up in an uncomfortable situation. While that experience with Jacob was scary, I try not to let it make me overly cynical about dating. There are plenty of good people out there. It's just a matter of being smart and trusting your instincts. I still use dating apps occasionally, but I'm much more selective about who I meet up with. I always do a bit of online sleuthing first and trust my gut if something feels off. Safety has to come first. At the end of the day, I'm grateful things didn't escalate further with Jacob. It could have been so much worse. The whole ordeal was definitely a wake-up call about the potential dangers lurking behind seemingly normal profiles. Dating will always involve some level of risk. You can never know someone completely, especially in the early stages. But being aware of red flags and potential dangers can go a long way in staying safe. I blocked Jacob's number as soon as I got home that night. I haven't heard from him since, and I hope I never do again. That experience changed how I approach online dating, making me more cautious but also more confident in trusting my instincts. While I wouldn't wish that experience on anyone, I've grown from it. I'm more assertive now about my boundaries and quicker to walk away from situations that don't feel right. It's a fine line between being open to new experiences and protecting yourself, but it's a balance I'm learning to strike. It was just another Friday night, and I was mindlessly swiping through Tinder, hoping to find a connection that would spark some excitement in my mundane life. That's when I came across Karina's profile. Her dark hair and piercing eyes seemed familiar, but I couldn't quite place where I'd seen her before. Intrigued, I swiped right, and to my surprise, we matched almost instantly. Our conversation started off casually, discussing our shared interests and favorite level haunts. Karina had a way of making me feel at ease, and before I knew it, we'd agreed to meet up for drinks at a trendy cocktail bar downtown. As I walked into the dimly lit bar, I spotted Karina sitting at a table in the corner. She looked even more stunning in person, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders and her red lips curled into a smile as she waved me over. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd seen her somewhere before, but I pushed the thought aside, chalking it up to the fact that she probably just had one of those familiar faces. We ordered our drinks and started chatting, the conversation flowing easily between us. However, as the night progressed, I couldn't help but notice that Karina's questions were becoming more and more personal. She asked about my dating history, probing for details about why my past relationships had ended and how I'd handled the breakups. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat, trying to steer the conversation to lighter topics, but Karina was relentless. So, have you ever ghosted someone? She asked, her eyes narrowing as she leaned in closer. I hesitated, not wanting to admit that I had, in fact, ghosted a few people in the past. But something about the intensity of Karina's gaze made me feel like I had to be honest. Yeah, I have. I admitted, looking down at my drink. It's not something I'm proud of, but sometimes it just seemed easier than having a difficult conversation. Karina nodded, a strange smile playing at the corners of her mouth. I see, she said, taking a sip of her cocktail. And how do you think that made the other person feel? I shifted in my seat again, feeling more and more uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was heading. I don't know, I said, shrugging. I guess I never really thought about it. Karina's smile whitened, but there was no warmth behind it. Well, Maybe it's time you did, she said, her voice taking on a cold, hard edge. Suddenly, it all clicked into place. I realized why Karina looked so familiar. She was friends with my ex-girlfriend, Jenna. Jenna and I had dated for almost a year, but things had ended messily when I had started to pull away, eventually hosting her completely. I'd never really stopped to consider how much I might have hurt her, but seeing the look on Karina's face, I knew I was about to find out. You know, Jenna was devastated when you disappeared on her, Karina said, her voice rising in volume. She didn't understand what she'd done wrong, why you just stopped responding to her messages and calls. It took her months to get over you, and even now, she still struggles with trust issues because of what you did. I felt my cheeks burning with shame as the weight of Karina's words sank in. I'd been selfish and cowardly, too focused on avoiding an uncomfortable situation to consider the impact my actions might have on someone else. I'm sorry, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I never meant to hurt her. Karina scoffed, rolling her eyes. Well, you did, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. And now you're going to know what it feels like to be humiliated and rejected in public, just like you did to Jenna. With that, she stood up, grabbing her purse and throwing a few bills down on the table. This entire date was a setup, she said, her voice rising so that the entire bar could hear. I just wanted to see the look on your face when you realized that you weren't going to get away with treating people like garbage anymore. I sat there, stunned, as Korea stormed out of the bar, leaving me alone with my shame and the curious stares of the other patrons. I couldn't believe what had just happened. I'd been lured into a trap by someone I thought I could trust, all because of a mistake I'd made in the past. As I paid the bill and made my way out of the bar, I couldn't stop replaying the evening's events in my mind. I felt sick to my stomach, knowing that I'd caused someone else so much pain and that I was now the one being publicly called out for my actions. But even as I walked home, feeling lower than I ever had before, I knew that I couldn't just brush this off and move on like I had in the past. Karina's words had struck a chord, forcing me to confront the consequences of my own selfishness and immaturity. I deleted my Tinder account that night, realizing that I needed to take a step back from dating and really focus on becoming a better person. It wasn't going to be easy, but I knew that I owed it to myself and to people I cared about to try. I reached out to Jenna, apologizing for the way I treated her and asking for her forgiveness. It was a difficult conversation, but one that I knew I needed to have. And while Jenna and I didn't rekindle our relationship, we were able to find some closure and move forward on better terms. And while I still had a long way to go, I'm committed to being a better person, both in my dating life and in my relationships with others. I know that I never want to be the reason someone else feels the way Jenna did, and I've determined to make sure that I never am again. Swiping through profiles, making a few matches here and there. That's how I met Jim. His pictures showed a tall, athletic guy with a warm smile that felt genuine. We matched and started chatting casually about our jobs, interests, and what brought us to the app. After a week of messaging, we decided to meet up for drinks at a local bar. I remember feeling excited but nervous, as anyone would be before a first date. Jim turned out to be even more charming in person. He worked in software development and had this way of making complex tech stuff sound interesting. The conversation flowed naturally, and before I knew it, 3 hours had passed. Our second date was dinner at this cute Italian place he picked. Jim insisted on paying again, saying he enjoyed treating me. We started seeing each other regularly after that, movies, walks in the park, trying new restaurants. He'd surprise me with little gifts like my favorite coffee or a book he thought I'd enjoy. Everything seemed perfect on the surface. Around the 1 month mark, subtle red flags started appearing. Jim would text constantly throughout the day, expecting immediate responses. If I took too long to reply, he'd send multiple follow-up messages asking what I was doing and who I was with. At first, I brushed it off as enthusiasm. Then came the conversation about dating apps. We were at his place watching a movie when he casually asked if I was still active on Tinder. I told him honestly that I was, since we hadn't discussed being exclusive. His whole demeanor changed instantly. The warmth in his eyes disappeared, replaced by something cold and angry. Jim started ranting about how disrespectful it was to keep dating apps while seeing someone. He said he deleted his profiles weeks ago because he was serious about me. When I explained that I wasn't ready for exclusivity, he got up and paced around the room, running his hands through his hair in frustration. After that night, Jim's behavior became increasingly controlling. He'd coincidentally show up at places he knew I frequented. A morning coffee run, he'd be there. A usual gym time. Suddenly, he started working out at the same gym. He even started eating lunch near my office, claiming he just wanted to see me more often. The turning point came when I noticed something odd on Tinder. A profile popped up using my photos, but with slight alterations. Different backgrounds, filtered versions of my pictures. I reported it immediately, but more kept appearing. These fake profiles would update their locations to match wherever I was, like a digital shadow following me around the city. My stomach dropped when I realized what was happening. Jim worked in tech. He had the skills to create these profiles. He was using them to track my movements and monitor my online activity. The thought of him watching me through fake accounts made my skin crawl. The harassment escalated quickly after that. Jim would send long messages alternating between declaring his love and accusing me of leading him on. He'd leave voicemails at all hours, sometimes just breathing into the phone. When I blocked his number, he created new ones to contact me. One night, I was home alone when I heard aggressive knocking at my door. Through the peephole, I could see Jim standing there, looking disheveled and angry. He had knocking for what felt like hours, calling my name and begging me to talk to him. I sat in terrified silence until he finally left. The fake profiles became more elaborate and disturbing. Some used photoshopped versions of my pictures in places I'd never been. Others included personal details about my life that only someone stalking me would know. It felt like my online identity was being stolen and twisted into something sinister. My friends urged me to go to the police, but I worried about making things worse. What if reporting him made him more aggressive? Plus, I had no concrete proof he was behind the fake profiles. The police couldn't do much without evidence. I ended up having to completely disappear from social media. I deleted all my dating profiles, changed my phone number, and made my social media accounts private. I even started varying my daily routine so I'd be harder to track. The whole experience left me feeling violated and paranoid. Months later, I still catch myself looking over my shoulder or checking for fake profiles online. Sometimes I wonder if Jim created other accounts I never found, if he's still out there watching and waiting. The scariest part is knowing that someone can seem so perfect at first, then turn into your worst nightmare. Dating apps are supposed to help us find connections, not put us in danger. But my experience with Jim taught me that you never really know who's behind those carefully curated profiles. What started as a promising match turned into a terrifying lesson about trust and online safety. It's been a year since everything happened, and I'm slowly getting back to normal. I started dating again, but I'm much more cautious now. While I still believe in finding love, I'll never forget how quickly a seemingly perfect match can reveal its darker side. So I came across Hira's profile. She was absolutely stunning, with a captivating smile and eyes that seemed to sparkle even in the photos. Her bio was witty and intriguing, and I found myself instantly drawn to her. I swiped right, hoping for a match, and to my delight, we connected almost immediately. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. Hira was charming, intelligent, and had a great sense of humor. She had a way of making me feel like I was the only person in the world, even through the screen of my phone. After a few days of texting back and forth, I finally mustered up the courage to ask her out on a date. To my surprise and excitement, she agreed, and we made plans to meet at a trendy new restaurant downtown. The night of the date arrived, and I couldn't contain my excitement. I spent hours getting ready, wanting to look my best for Hira. I arrived at the restaurant a few minutes early and waited anxiously for her to show up. When she walked in, my heart skipped a beat. She looked even more beautiful in person, wearing a stunning red dress that hugged her curves in all the right places. Her hair was perfectly styled, and her makeup was flawless. I couldn't believe my luck. We sat down at our table and ordered our meals, engaging in lively conversation throughout the evening. Hera was just as charming and witty in person as she had been over text. I found myself hanging on to her every word. We talked about our lives, our hopes, and our dreams. She had a fascinating background and had traveled to many places around the world. I was captivated by her stories and her infectious laughter. As the night went on, I realized that I was falling for her. The food was delicious, and the ambience of the restaurant was perfect for a romantic evening. We shared a bottle of wine and talked for hours, lost in each other's company. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt such a strong connection with someone. As the evening drew to a close, the waiter brought over the check. I reached for my wallet, ready to pay, when Hira suddenly spoke up. She apologized profusely, explaining that she had forgotten her wallet at home. She promised to Venmo me her share of the bill as soon as she got back. Being the gentleman I am, I assured her it was no problem and covered the entire dinner. It was a small price to pay for such a wonderful evening. We said our goodbyes and I walked her to her car, already looking forward to our next date. I couldn't wait to see her again and explore the connection we had formed. I sent her a text later that night, thanking her for a wonderful evening and expressing my desire to see her again soon. However, days passed and I received no response. I tried reaching out a few more times, but still nothing. It was as if Hira had vanished into thin air. I started to worry that something had happened to her. I checked her Tinder profile, hoping to find some answers, but to my shock, her profile had completely disappeared. It was as if she had never existed. I was confused and a little hurt. I couldn't understand why she would ghost me after such an amazing date. I started to wonder if I had imagined the entire thing, but the charge on my credit card for the dinner was a stark reminder that it had been all too real. As time went on, I began to hear whispers from other guys in the area about a woman who sounded suspiciously like Hira. They all had similar stories: a charming woman who conveniently forgot her wallet at the end of the date and promised to pay them back, only to ghost them and delete her profile shortly after. It became clear that I wasn't the only one who had fallen victim to her scheme. I felt foolish and betrayed, but I also couldn't help but admire the audacity of her con. She had played the game so well, using her charm and beauty to manipulate unsuspecting men into paying for expensive dinners before disappearing without a trace. It was a harsh lesson, but one that I wouldn't soon forget. From that moment on, I approached online dating with a newfound sense of caution. I learned to trust my instincts and to be wary of anyone who seemed too good to be true. I started doing more research on my matches, looking for any red flags or inconsistencies in their profiles or stories. I also made a point of splitting the bill on first dates, just to be safe. And while I never saw or heard from Hira again, her memory lingered, serving as a constant reminder of the dangers that lurk beneath the surface of the digital dating world. I couldn't help but wonder how many other men she had scammed, and how much money she had made off of her scheme. It was a sobering thought. In the end, I chalked it up to a painful but valuable experience. I realized that not everyone on dating apps is who they claim to be, and that it's important to protect myself both emotionally and financially. The Tinder horror story with Hira may have left a scar, but it also made me a wiser, more discerning dater in the long run. I still believe in love and the power of connection, but I also know that it's important to be cautious and to trust my gut. I won't let one bad experience ruin my chances of finding someone special, but I also won't be so quick to fall for someone's charm and good looks. She saw me as just another mark, another wallet to empty before moving on to the next victim. It's a sad reality of the modern dating world, but it's one that we all have to be aware of. Despite it all, I haven't given up on love. I know that there are good people out there, people who are genuine and honest and looking for a real connection. And when I find that person, I'll be ready. I'll be wiser, stronger, and more discerning, thanks in part to my experience with Hira. It was a painful one, but it was one that I needed to learn. And who knows, maybe one day I'll be able to look back on that evening with a sense of humor, knowing that it was just another bump in the road on my journey to finding true love.